I want to agree with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for just a second. For those, we hadn't talked about this, but
as Rush said yesterday in this issue, he said, hey, she's right about that. She doesn't know why, but she's right about that.
She has no idea why she's right about it. Her quote or her tweet was, Amazon is a billion-dollar company. The idea that it was receive hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks at a time when our subway is crumbling and our communities need more investment, not less, is extremely concerning to residents here. And I get that. The one word I would insert is Amazon is a multi-billion-dollar company, not just a billion-dollar. Amazon announced they were building a 4 million square foot office space campus, and they've been kind of scouting it around or shopping it around the country for the last 18 months. They're building one in, I think, Crystal City, Virginia, which is just outside of Alexandria. So Alexandria is a suburb of Washington. Alexandria's prospered to the point that it's got its own suburb called Crystal City. And then you've got Long Island, New York, another city that was in the running. The giant retailer. I don't know that Amazon's a retailer. Amazon is a logistics business. Amazon, I think, has been misidentified as a retailer. They're basically, I mean, Jeff Bezos is the biggest concierge agency in America. I mean, that's kind of what he does, and done a phenomenal job of it, and the company has become, incredibly profitable. But they've got about 50,000 employees, 4 million square feet of office space, and they got $1.5 billion. That's right, $1.5 billion in incentives from New York. Now, New York's a pretty expensive place to do business, so you wonder why New York. Well, you start digging in the deal. There's a lot of accounting that says the state of New York and the city of New York gave out about $48,000 per job created. I saw an AEI survey or research on it. I think it's closer to $70,000. I believe the number is about $70,000 per job created. They were very aggressive in their pursuit of Amazon locating in their, part of the country, their neck of the woods. But they weren't as aggressive as some of the companies or some of the cities who were told, no, thank you. Stonecrest, Georgia, suburb of Atlanta, offered up a portion of the city to be renamed Amazon and to institute Jeff Bezos as the permanent mayor for life. Now, you've got to believe there's some sarcasm in that. That's probably anti-constitutional. Boston, Alec, offered the company a team of government employees, I know this to be true, whose salaries would be paid by Bostonians' tax dollars to exclusively represent the company's interest. In other words, they would not have had to hire their own lobbyist. The city of Boston would have put them on the taxpayer dole, and they would have lobbied on behalf of Amazon in issues relating to whatever it is Amazon has coming down the pike. I've said before that the way we recruit business and industry in America today is really kind of sort of anti-American. It is. We offer the farm to these companies to come to our neighborhoods or our cities or our states. We have a ribbon cutting. I've been a part of them. I'm not being hypocritical here. I've been very much involved in the recruiting of economic development to Florence County when I was on county council. We had a pretty good run. Gave away the farm on a couple of times, and a couple of things I think have paid dividends. A couple of the others, I think we probably made some mistakes in regards to that. But it's interesting to me, Rev, that we live in an age and an era where the wealthiest man in the world. That's what Jeff Bezos is today. I don't think he is. I still think some of the Saudi princes have undisclosed wealth that exceeds what Bezos or Gates or Buffett are worth, but it's kind of tied up in the government coffers. Belongs to them.
Like Putin. Too.
Yeah, well, it's very similar to that. I think there are probably a handful of people like that. Not a double handful, probably a single handful of people whose personal wealth is very tied to the government wealth. In Saudi Arabia in particular, it'd be a monarch. So a lot of the government's wealth would be tied to the royal family. So Bezos is probably not the wealthiest man on earth, but as far as we know and disclosed earnings and disclosed wealth and disclosed assets, he is right now, the richest man in the world. Well, why does the richest man in the world and his company need $1.5 billion in economic development incentives to force him or coerce him into coming to your town? It's the way we've done it for a long time. It's a little bit like I've said before, and we've had this debate on the show, and there are those that disagree, and it's a little bit like the universal basic income yesterday. That there is no way you would ever convince me that universal basic income makes any sense until you look at the balance sheet of the federal government and how much money we spend on entitlements. It's almost the lunacy in the current leads to the lunacy of a future decision. And I think the lunacy of how we've recruited companies all over the country has led to the lunacy of giving the wealthiest man in his company in the world $1.5 billion in taxpayer subsidies to create 50,000 jobs and 4 million square feet of office space. I don't believe Amazon makes that decision based on incentives. I mean, it's all about qualified and eligible workforce to them. When they announced they were going to create 50,000 new jobs, places like South Carolina are off the, there's no way. I mean, you've got to have a critical mass of people, a fairly educated and capable critical mass of people to provide the workforce necessary when something like this comes down the pipe. You said you read where the average salary is
$150,000.
See, that's a good amount of money in South Carolina. I'll be honest. You get up around New York City, $150 is still a good salary. Don't get me wrong, but it ain't get rich money. I mean, you don't live in the nice neighborhoods or the suburbs of New York City, on $150. But I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is right. I think there's got to be a day. Maybe this is the straw that
things
breaks.
I never thought I'd hear you say.
It troubles me to say it. But I think she's on to something when she says the idea that a multi-billion-dollar international company who is making record profits as we speak is basically coercing the state of New York and the city of New York City to give it $1.5 billion of incentives to the tune of about $70,000 per job. And really, Rev, you're skewing the labor market. I mean, you're creating a lot of disadvantages with current companies who have an employee there that they can't pay $1.50 to. So in essence, the person there already paying taxes as part of the current tax base is funding a direct competitor in the labor market. I'm not saying the company does something similar to Amazon. Maybe they don't. Maybe they make widgets. But they're making widgets, and let's say their average salary is $70,000 a year, and they've got 100 employees, a very capable workforce, and all of a sudden, 25 of the very capable members of their workforce say, hey, man, I can go across the street and work at Amazon and make $150,000. The owner of the company says, yeah, you can. Guess what? My tax dollars subsidized Amazon coming here. Imagine the price of housing. Imagine the increase in the price of housing when the average salary in that, let's call it the borough of New York City, let's say the average salary in that borough is $100,000, 50,000 jobs at $150,000. What does that do to the housing market? It goes back to manipulating the economy. Amazon will manipulate the economy in the workforce and the price of real estate. But the manipulating of that workforce, the manipulating of that housing sector will be done by taxpayer dollars. An infusion of incentives into the balance sheet of, in other words, for Amazon to go to New York City, it got a lot cheaper. It got exactly $1.5 billion cheaper. And Amazon will directly compete with the forces that have been there for a long time and funding the $1.5 billion. That just makes no sense to me. I mean, it really makes zero sense.
It doesn't seem fair.
Well, it's not fair. I mean, I understand the enticement. I understand wanting those 50,000 jobs, wanting a company like Amazon to occupy 4 million square feet of office space. I mean, I am so aware of that. It's ridiculous. But I think there are ancillary effects, and I think this goes back to my ripple theory of the government. And I think this is where business people are better suited to serve in government. The ripple theory is this. In the bureaucratic world, in the world of big government, they believe you can throw a boulder in the middle of the lake and the periphery is okay. When in reality, when you throw that boulder in the middle of that lake, it takes a ripple effect. And the ripples work themselves through other parts of the economy in a very ancillary, an indirect sort of way. And I think you're going to see that. And I think it's unfair. And I've been a part of the unfairness. I mean, rest assured, I've been a part of some of the recruiting of economic development to Florence County. Fairly up close and personal. 12 or 13 years ago. But as I revisit the decision and I look at such an astronomical amount of money, $1.5 billion, still used to talking about debt. We got to shift gears. We're not talking about debt because in debt, $1 billion ain't jack, right? In federal debt, $1 billion doesn't matter. It's $1 trillion that we worry about. With Amazon, $1 billion is still a meaningful amount of money.
So when it comes down to it, would you be for no incentives?
Well, I mean, if we're going down the road of reforming government, we talked about debt. We talked about entitlements. We talked about, the safety net programs yesterday, the 126 safety net programs that are available to, the lower income earners in our country. Yes, I think you've got to go down the road of how we've socialized the upper crust in America. I don't think there's any question. I think it's disingenuous and hypocritical to say we're going to do away with these 126 welfare programs for people who don't work, but we're going to keep giving $1.5 billion to the richest guy in America. I mean, I get what he brings to the table. I get the opportunities that will ensue. I am so aware of the economic activity and vibrancy that will be in that part of the country once Amazon gets there. But the American taxpayer is paying for a lot of the incentives to get him there, and I think that's unfair. So I don't want to be hypocritical. I think if you're going to try and change the way we give away things to poor people in America, you've honestly got to change the way we give away things to wealthy people in America. And so, yes, in that way, in that regard, I would be absolutely for abolishing incentives to recruit economic development. Now, with the world the way it is now, you better be real good at it in recruiting. It's a little bit like college football, Reb. You got a 5-star player, and the 5-star player is narrowed his choices to Alabama, Clemson, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida State. There's no telling what those 5 schools will do to get that 5-star player. We know what they're supposed to and what they're not supposed to, but we also know that schools do a lot of what they're not supposed to get the player. I just don't think it makes any sense. I don't think it's fair to the American taxpayer and the taxpayer of New York to subsidize Bezos and Amazon to come into New York and directly compete with taxpayer dollars in the labor force. I mean, what happens to the price of real estate? Not just the housing. What happens to the price of office space when he consumes 4 million square feet of it? So you got a person paying hypothetically $30 a square foot for office space. Bezos comes there, completely destroys the rules of supply and demand. I mean, he obliterates that the day he gets there. So the next thing you know, when your lease comes up, the company that does your lease doesn't want $30 a foot. They want $45 a foot. So you basically, as a business owner, have subsidized the raising of your lease. And I think it gets real confusing. It gets, I mean, it's just not American. I mean, it's just not American for a company to fund the competitor. And I was a part of that. I mean, I'm not going to be hypocritical. I was very much in support of whatever it took to recruit industry here. All I'm saying is if we're going to be serious, if we believe entitlements are one of the drivers of the problem we've got with debt, and entitlements, means-tested entitlements in particular, who are for needy people, then yeah, I think you've got to address it on both ends of that spectrum. We'll take a break. We'll be back after the break. Thanks to Schofields. Good Morning PD Live 95.